friendships in ministry and how that works in our lives. This comes from a book called Come Be My Light. And I don't know if any of you read this book. It came out in 2007. And it's writings from the journal of Mother Teresa. And so I'm assuming that everybody here probably knows something about Mother Teresa or who she was, right? That won't be in the quiz, Tony. Don't worry about it. But when we think of Mother Teresa, we think of someone who did amazing things. We think of somebody who God used in amazing ways. And put aside, for just the sake of this conversation, put aside maybe what some of her religious beliefs were, and maybe some of your own feelings about that, or some of your interpretation of Catholic theology and things like that. Put that aside for a second, and just the facts being that this was an amazing woman who basically gave all of her life to help people that were poor, people that were living in abject poverty, people that were homeless, people that were without food on the streets of Calcutta, and basically just actually did some amazing things. And throughout her journey in ministry, she journaled. We talked about this weeks ago. She journaled, and it's really easy because during the years in which you guys probably became aware of Mother Teresa, she was a pretty popular figure. She was being hosted by presidents. She was being talked about by people like Oprah Winfrey, things like that. And so it's really kind of easy to kind of get a perception of what her life might have been like, or sometimes in situations like that we can guess what it was like, or we can guess the kind of person they are, or the kind of struggles that they might have or might not have. This is really interesting, and I want to read just a couple excerpts from this book. And again, these are from her journal. This is a letter that she wrote to one of her fathers, one of her priests. And so here's something that she said. She said, "Now, Father, since 49 or 50, this terrible sense of loss, this untold darkness, this loneliness, this continual longing for God, which gives me that pain deep down in my heart. Darkness is such that I really do not see, neither with my mind nor with my reason. The place of God in my soul is blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and long for God. And then it is that I feel that He does not want me. He is not there. God does not want me. Sometimes I just hear my own heart cry out, 'My God,' and nothing else comes. The torture and the pain I can't explain." Here's another one where she says, "It is so painful to be lonely for God. Faithfully, I have kept my resolution." Listen to this. This is an amazing statement. She says, "The greater the pain and the darker the darkness, the sweeter will be my smile at God. Pray for me that I might love Jesus." And I got one more here I want to read to you real quick. She said, "I know that you feel this, really the full meaning of the poverty of Jesus. He, being rich, became poor. The riches of the company of His Father He gave up by becoming a man like us in all things except sin. You too are experiencing that giving up for love of Him. Do not be afraid. All will be well. The seed has to die if it is to produce fruit. I am more than sure that Jesus wants Missionary Brothers of the Word," which was an organization that she worked with, "by all means to exist. And this aloneness is the beginning of great love. You are not alone. Jesus in you. The tabernacle is the most beautiful sign for you to look at when you feel lonely. Don't be afraid. He is there in spite of the darkness and failure. It was like that for Jesus in the garden. Could you not watch 1 hour? He felt so lonely that night. Don't be afraid. Put your hand in Our Lady's hand and walk with her. The will of the Father was that terrible loneliness in the Garden of Gethsemane on the cross. He was completely alone. If we are true followers of Jesus, we too must experience the loneliness of Christ. He perspired blood. It was so difficult for Him to go through the humiliation of His passion." And one of the things that you discover when you read more in the book and you read more excerpts of what she journaled is that one of the things that Mother Teresa really struggled with was loneliness. She felt as if she had no friends. She felt as if she was out there doing what God wanted her to do, but many times she just felt like there was no one there with her in the journey. There was no significant friendships. There was no significant relationships. She obviously didn't have some of the advantages that we have now when it comes to technology and the way that it helps us connect with people. We're just, in many instances, we're literally just a text message away or, internet access away from being able to connect with somebody that we know that's a friend. She didn't have some of those advantages. And as she journals and you read through this book, and it's a really interesting read, and I haven't gotten through the whole book, but it might be something you want to pick up one day when you don't have a million textbooks to read. It's really interesting to hear the heart cry of a person who says, I'm lonely. I'm doing what God wants me to do, but I just don't feel like I have very many friends. There's a recent survey they did of full-time pastors in ministry, and it was interesting because hang on one second. There we go. It was interesting because they interviewed 1,000 pastors in the United States, and close to 90-some%, it was like 98% of them said that they felt like it was a great blessing to be in ministry, that they felt like it was a great honor for them to be in full-time ministry. But more than half of them, 55% to be exact, said this. They said that they find it very easy to be discouraged and that they oftentimes feel lonely. And that's not something that we talk about a lot. I don't know, whether that's talked about a lot here in other classes or not. But I want to talk about it tonight because it's something that I've wrestled with in being in youth ministry and being in full-time ministry in almost 16 years now. I've gone through many seasons where I just felt like I was all alone, and these are seasons where for 5 years, my first 5 years out of college here at Valley Forge, I went back to Pittsburgh. I worked with my dad on his staff, so I had family around me. And even having family around me, there were still many times that I just felt like I was all alone. Like, where are all the friends at? And then for the last, 11 years next month, where I'm at now, there's been many times where I felt like, man, where are the friendships? Why do I feel so alone? Why do I feel like there's no one here? Why do I feel like there's no one supporting me? Why do I feel like I'm all in this all by myself? At some point in your life, at some point in your ministry in the future, whether that ministry be full-time vocational or whether it be in the job market somewhere, at some point you're going to feel loneliness. In fact, some of you are saying to yourself, it's not at some point for me, it's like here and now for me. Like you feel it even now. Even on this campus with hundreds of other students around, it's easy to all of a sudden be like, I feel alone. I feel like there's no one here for me. And life is so crazy because we go from these high moments where everything is just so great and it's just so wonderful, and a week later, or sometimes even a day or 2 days later, we feel like we just came all the way down the other side of the mountain and we're just like completely lonely. And there's biblical stories about that. I mean, think about the story of Elijah, right? Think about Elijah. There he is. He's up on top of the mountain. There's 450 prophets of Baal. It's his God versus their God. You remember this story? And we're all going to build sacrifices to our God, and they sing and dance and cut themselves silly all day long. Their God doesn't show up. Elijah goes down and gets the 12 buckets of water, and he pours it over the sacrifice, and he calls down fire. What a mountaintop experience, right? What an exhilarating moment. Elijah's just proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that his God is the real, true God of Israel. I mean, this guy should be on cloud 9. But when you read the context of the story, what happens next? Elijah finds himself running for his life from who? Jezebel, right? And finds himself under a tree being fed by, angels and birds that God's sending along, and he basically says, I want to die, right? God leads him to a cave, and there he has an experience, and so here's Elijah, one of the great prophets that we read about in the Bible, who at the end of the day is struggling with the highs and lows of ministry, who at the end of the day is struggling with, there's some moments that are just so great, and you cherish those moments, and you write about them in your journal, and they're amazing, and you always remember them. And then there's those moments where you sit down and you just say, I'm all alone. There's no one around. I don't feel like there's anyone to talk to. So what we're going to talk about tonight is really focusing in on, when we talk about friendships and ministry, a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is going to really focus in on how do we deal with the seasons of loneliness? How do we overcome that? And what you're going to discover if you're paying attention as you're going through your notes is that pretty much everything we're going to talk about doesn't just apply if you end up being a pastor somewhere, but just applies in life in general. How do I deal with my seasons of loneliness? All right? So that's what we're going to kind of dive into for the next couple minutes before our guest comes. And then our guest tonight is Sean Bentley. He's a youth pastor at Christian Life in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. And has been a close friend of mine for years. Sean's been one of those guys, and I'm going to talk about this tonight. He's been one of those guys that I've intentionally built relationships with. Because part of what I want to accomplish in this class, and part of what I hope to do in this class, is model for you, as much as I can, that what we're talking about are things that I'm striving to live out myself. And so Sean's like one of those guys that I know. I could pick up the phone, I could call him anytime, really, and have somebody on the other end of the phone that's going to be there to listen to me and going to be there to encourage me and going to be there to pray for me. And you're going to need people like that in your life. I need people like that in my life. So we're going to talk about that for the next couple minutes. So, friendships and ministry. Here's a couple things. Number one, just jumping into your notes here now. Understand that being a leader can be extremely lonely. And letter A, at times you have a longing for belonging. Right? Your life will change a lot when you leave the campus or you leave the college experience at Valley Forge. You know, I mean, life changes from the time you finished in a church somewhere, in a youth ministry somewhere, and came here. Life is going to change again for you when you leave this place and you move on to the next place. And so oftentimes, being here in a place like this doesn't always prepare us for how to deal with loneliness. Because there's really only one thing that can prepare us for loneliness, and what is it? Loneliness. Right? You can't really always prepare for something until you actually are in the middle of experiencing it. And so there's a fallacy, and it's just hypothetically, most of us really we just think, we just have this like thought process that, hey, when I'm a leader, when I'm in a church, I'll never have to deal with loneliness because there'll always be tons of people around. If you end up going to youth ministry or pastoral ministry or counseling ministry or something like that, there's always going to be tons of people around. There's always going to be someone to hang out with. There's always going to be this or that. There's always going to be parents or youth leaders or whatever. And the reality is that sometimes being a leader and having to make the decisions that a leader makes can at times be one of the loneliest experiences that you ever have in your life. And being a leader in that sense where it sets you apart from other people, oftentimes you find yourself having this longing to just belong. I just want to belong. Like, I don't always want to be the guy who, has to make the decisions or want to be the guy that all the focus on. I just want to like chill and I just want to kind of fit in. And sometimes I see guys do this a lot. I see younger guys in youth ministry do this a lot, where their desire to just kind of belong and their desire to just kind of fit in leads them to make a lot of really immature mistakes with the way that they relate to students and with the way that they relate to parents, because they're not willing to separate themselves enough as a leader to deal with the fact that sometimes leadership is lonely. I mean, sometimes that's just the reality of it. And so, when you're in college, you get to fit in. You get to just belong. There's not always that pressure, I've got to lead. There's not always that pressure of my convictions have to be a step above everyone else's convictions, and my standards have to be a step above everyone else's standards. You don't always have that pressure here, right? But when you get into a ministry situation, that pressure's on. Pressure is definitely on, because now you got parents looking at you, you got students looking at you, you got other staff members looking at you, you got senior pastors looking at you, and the expectation is really clear. They expect leadership, and sometimes that expectation begins to make you feel like, oh, I'm all in this by myself. And you go from a college standpoint where you've got maybe friends galore all over the place, to all of a sudden you find yourself in an unknown place, somewhere you've never lived before, and maybe it's just you because you're single, or maybe it's just you and your spouse, and here you are. We're lonely. We don't have anyone to hang out with. And sometimes that's the cost of leadership. There's a couple of thoughts to go along with this here. Letter B. Although being in God's will is extremely fulfilling, it can also be extremely lonely. And I'll just go through these blanks here and fill them in for you, and then we'll talk about them. In order to be the leader, you have to be ahead of the pack. That's what I was just mentioning. But you can't always just be the guy who just fits in. If others are going to follow you, you have to be ahead. God will most likely call you to be in front of the crowd in regards to your convictions. Again, this is where a lot of young leaders make the mistake. Because in a college campus setting, the pressure isn't always on you. The pressure wasn't always on me when I was a student here to be a step ahead of the pack. It just wasn't. It was okay for me to just fit in. It was okay for me to be one of the guys. It was okay just to be like, hey, he's just Aaron. He's just, one of the many faces here at the school. But that's not true anymore when you get into the ministry setting. Now you become the face of a youth ministry. Now you become the person who has pastor in front of their name. Now instead of you just being Aaron or whatever your nickname was when you were at school, right? Now, you're pastor. I remember when I first started at Glad Tidings, there was this one family that insisted on not just calling me Pastor Aaron or calling me PE, which is what a lot of the kids did, but they insisted on calling me Pastor Holt. I'm like, oh my gosh, it made me feel so old, so proper or whatever. And so it's a different world now. When I was in college here, everyone just called me E. That was my name. I was just E, right? I don't know how it got stuck, but it's E. And that's just what I was. One night in one of our, it's kind of funny. It's who you guys are playing tonight, Litchfield, Philadelphia. We were playing them. I was really mad. It was the end of the game. I wasn't getting the calls that I wanted. And I kind of pushed out of bounds on one play. The ref didn't blow the whistle. I was ticked. We were losing or whatever. And I ran over to one of at the time, I don't even think they're there anymore, but they had like the gym doors on the one side. And I just kicked the door because I was just mad. So I kicked the door, not realizing that the door was so cheap that it wasn't just going to fly open, that my foot was actually going to go through the door and get stuck. And so in the middle of the game, while the rest of my team's playing, I'm on the sidelines, trying to get my foot, out of this door, and, just random memories. I'm just one of the guys in that moment. It's not a big deal, I do something like that now. Well, now it's well, gosh, why does the pastor lose his temper so quick, Why does the pastor have to be overly competitive, Why does it always have to be that way? That's one of the challenges that you and I will face, that I'm facing now, that you're going to face when you're going to be in that leadership role. Your convictions have to be a step ahead of everybody else. All right? Number 2 here under this section. It can be extremely lonely when you move to a new location. All right? God's going to call some of you to a new location. And all of a sudden it's I got no friends in this area. I've got no family. I went through that. I went from, I'm working 3 blocks from the church that I grew up, where my dad's a senior pastor, where my mom's on staff as the bookkeeper, where my sister's really involved with the worship ministry, where my uncle is the principal of the Christian school of the church, and there's just family everywhere. I went from that to where I'm at now. No family, no one else around, it's just us. Here we are, and I remember those early years where it's just kind of you're sitting there in the evening and you're like, okay, all right, it's just us, and here we go. So moving to a new location can be extremely lonely. Number 3 here, although Jesus was in God's will, he even experienced times of loneliness. And you see that in Matthew 26, which was exactly what Mother Teresa was referring to when she talked about his periods of loneliness in the garden and just desiring his disciples, the guys that he had invested and poured himself into for the last 3 years, just desiring them to what? To be with him in the journey, to stay up, just stay awake with me. You're going to find yourself having that desire. You're going to find yourself in the midst of moments where you say, man, I just wish that one person would support me. I just wish that one guy would come along with me on this journey, that someone would be along with me. Letter C here. As a leader, you'll be required to make difficult decisions, which at times will make you feel lonely, because people will disagree with you. Because all of a sudden, everyone in the room is going to look at you and say, no, I'm not on board with that. No, I don't like that. You're the leader, though. You make the decision. Sometimes you make the decision and you know it's the right decision. You know that God's spoken to you. You know that this is the direction to go. But here you are, all by yourself. You feel lonely. A couple thoughts with it. If you always please the crowd, you're probably not following Christ. Sometimes being a follower of Christ involves embracing loneliness. Sometimes being a follower of Christ means that you embrace the fact that some of the people that you want to be your closest friends just won't be some of your closest friends moving forward. Number 2, you experience pressure simply due to the position. Letter A, learn to differentiate between personal and positional attacks. This is huge. Let's camp on this for a second. This is huge. If you allow every attack that comes your way in life or in ministry to be personal, to be about you not being liked, to be about someone thinking that something's wrong with you or someone doesn't like you or appreciate you as a person. If you allow it all to be personal, your heart is going to get chewed up and spit out in a couple years' time in ministry. It will happen. You'll come in. You'll be like Elijah. You'll come into that church. You'll come into that youth ministry. You'll come into that position, whatever it is. People will love you. People will adore you. People will say they're so excited that you're there. That they'll be your friend. They'll help you move in. They'll help you unpack your boxes. And you're going to be like, this is amazing. They'll invite you over to their house for dinner. They want you to get to know their kid. It'll be great. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, you just be, and then all of a sudden there'll be a disagreement. There'll be a moment. There'll be a leadership moment where you have to make a decision. And now someone's not happy with you anymore. Now someone is not on your side anymore. Now all of a sudden they're not inviting you over the house anymore. Now all of a sudden you're hearing that they're not saying nice things about you. And you have to understand that sometimes it's not a personal thing. Sometimes it's a positional thing. Sometimes the work of the devil is to convince you that his attacks against your position of authority, your spiritual authority as a leader in your church or in your ministry, sometimes the devil tries to take all of those things and just make them personal. People don't like you. They're never going to like you. They're going to care about. My wife and I just had this conversation the other day, and she was just she made a comment like, she said why do people not like us? It was kind of a relation. We were talking about some stuff at church or whatever. And she said, why do people like us? She's like, I feel like no one at church likes us. And I said, no. I said, that's not true. I said, they love you. They just don't like me. And she's like, what? And I'm just like, I said, it comes with the territory of being the youth pastor. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, like, youth pastors, like us and the music guys are the two easiest targets in the whole church. And I said, and unfortunately, I got both jobs at our church, so it makes it even harder, And I was like, it's just easy. It's easy to attack the position. It's easy for parents, the moment that their kid comes home from a youth group and they're not happy about something, to be upset now with the youth pastor, as opposed to being balanced and realize that kids are kids in youth groups the same way they are maybe in a lot of the public schools. Stuff happens, drama happens, kids. It is the way that it is. But I was sharing with her. I was like, I just had to learn over time that a lot of people, when they say they're upset with me, they're not really upset with me as a person. They're not really upset with Aaron. Because I believe if I actually got a chance to get to know them, hopefully they would appreciate me or they would like me. They just sometimes don't like the decisions that I have to make, or they don't like sometimes the position of the youth pastor and the things that they have to do. It's just an easy target. If you're going to go into youth ministry, guess what? Just go paint a big bullseye on your chest, on your back. It will happen. There will be people that for a season will love you and praise you and have nothing but great things to say about you. And then there'll be a season where they're going to say a lot of bad things about you. Is it personal? Is it positional? You got to figure out which one that it is. And if it's positional, you have to learn how to guard your heart and let those things just run off your back and say, you know what? It's the price of being a leader. It's the price of being called into ministry. Guess what? Not everybody liked Jesus. Right? And Jesus himself even said what? Beware of when all men speak well of you. So even Jesus himself was preparing us, not just as future pastors, but as followers of Christ. He was simply helping us understand, listen, everyone's not going to like you. It's okay. It's all right. Last point here, number 3. As a leader, you can expect frontline fire, especially in youth ministry. You can expect it's going to happen. You probably already got it. You're looking ahead. Letter D, as your ministry grows larger, things can become lonelier. It happens. It's a total fallacy in our way of thinking. We think that if I go to a larger church, then that means there's going to be more people, that means I'm going to have more friends. Not true necessarily. You can feel even lonelier. You can feel even more disconnected. Couple thoughts with it here. People don't love you because you're you. They love you because of who you are. Who are you? Are you going to be a person of character? Are you going to be someone that they can love in that way? In the church world, politics can quickly pollute your relationships. People wanting to get their own ways, board members who have kids in the youth ministry, parents who are youth leaders and have kids in the youth ministry. And they want something to happen this way, or they want to provide this for their kids, There's church parents out there that don't want their kids to be involved in anything that public schools have to offer. And so they want to get their kid to get all the experiences out of the youth ministry. And so there's tremendous pressure sometimes that you have to provide this, and you have to do this, and you have to help with this situation. And so it becomes very political. Some people desire to be your friend simply due to your position or their possessions, because they think they can buy you, or they're a faithful giver or a tither in the church. Right? And so here's one thought here on this little section here. Don't be guilty of loving things and using people. Don't be guilty of loving things and using people, because it's really, really, really far too easy in ministry, especially if you're wrestling with loneliness, of trying to fill that need by loving the things of ministry. Whether it's an actual physical thing that you have, or whether it's the programs, or whether it's the cool marketing, or whether it's the next trip that's coming on, and all of those things. You can fall in love with those things. You can fall in love with those programs. And the end result is you're just using people instead of loving the people and using the programs. I had a real close friend of mine. In fact, it was Darren Heilman, who we did a Skype interview with a couple weeks ago. And one night we were sitting out, him and his wife and my wife and I, we were sitting at an Outback Steakhouse one night. We were just out together having fun, talking and sharing. And I just was going through a season in ministry where I was upset about a lot of different things, and I was really critical about some different things that were happening in my youth ministry. And I was just kind of laying it all out there for Darren, and this and that. And a lot of it was, being critical towards some of my youth leaders who I just felt like weren't really living up to the expectations that I had for them, and just different things like that. And I was just kind of laying it all out there, and kind of got done and kind of paused, and Darren looked at me and he said, are we friends? I said, oh yeah, we're great friends. What does that mean? He said, no, like are we close? And I'm like, yeah. He said, are we close enough that I can just be totally honest with you? I was like, please, it's totally cool. Just be honest with me, I need it. And he said, I think your biggest problem right now is that you love your programs and you use your people. And I think you need to learn how to love your people and use your programs. I needed that. I needed that in my life. That was one of those refocusing moments. That was like someone taking off my glasses where the lenses were all dirty and messed up, and cleaned them up for me and gave them back to me and said, hey, look at it this way. And so it's easy in the midst of our desire for friendships, in the midst of what's happening in ministry, in the midst of maybe struggling with loneliness, to lose our focus for what it's really all about. And loving people even when they're not lovable. Right? Right? Not everyone's lovable. I heard Rick Warren say this once, and it's kind of funny, but it's true. He said, you don't have to like everybody, but you do have to love everybody. And it's like, that's like, I don't like everybody. I don't like their personality. They're not going to be my best friends. But from a biblical perspective, I'm called to love them all. I'm called to care about every single one of them, regardless of what's happening in my life. Here we go. This is like number 2 again, but it's back to our original list. Learn to recognize loneliness as God's cry for friendship time with you. Here's the one big thing. If there was one big thing that you took away from tonight's class, it would be this section right here. Loneliness, letter A, forces us to draw companionship from the living God that we would otherwise attempt to draw from a human being. I don't need to ask for a show of hands in this, because I already know what the answer is. If I just said, hey, if you've ever wrestled with loneliness in your life, raise your hand. I know that everybody would put their hand up, including myself. Here's what I would love for you to do. I would love for you to reprogram in your mind that the next time you feel that longing, the next time you feel that loneliness, the next time you have that moment where you feel all alone, and your brain starts to scramble. I don't know if yours works the same way that mine works, but this is what happens to me. When I start to feel lonely, my brain starts to scramble. Who can I call? Who can I talk to? And so I sometimes I'll literally just grab my phone and I just start scrolling through my address book. Right? And then I can't find anybody, and then it's like Facebook. What's going on? This Facebook. Okay, let me check Twitter. Okay, maybe I just need some music. And he said, okay, let me find a great music. Let me find something that will pick me up, or let me find something that will make me feel sad and I'll cry. I don't know, But I don't. That's my natural default when I start to feel lonely. I've been working on my natural default when I feel lonely is to say to myself, I want to be with Jesus. I want to spend time with Jesus. I want to spend time with God. This is what I'd love for you to be able to reprogram in your mind, because you're going to need this to survive, not just in ministry, but in life as a follower of Jesus. You're going to need to learn how to identify that feeling of loneliness that all of us know what it feels like because we've all experienced it. You're going to need to learn how to take that feeling of loneliness and take the energy of that feeling of loneliness and channel it into, this is now me pursuing God. I'm recognizing my loneliness as a friendship opportunity. I'm recognizing it as an opportunity for me just to talk with God. You know, sometimes what I'll do is oftentimes when I'm thinking, when I'm feeling loneliness, you know, like I'm driving, going somewhere or whatever, it's like, you know, shut it all down. Shut the phone down. Shut the ESPN radio off. I don't know why I listen to it so much. I just love it, you know. Shut it off and just drive. And just talk to God like He's sitting right there in the front seat with me. And let's just be friends. God, I'm just feeling lonely right now. God, I just need you in my life. You're going to need to learn how to turn all of that loneliness type energy into, I'm going after God with it. And this just goes along with it. Learn to turn lonely times into alone times. God's not so interested in having a business partner in ministry as He is in having you as His son or His daughter. That's what He wants. More than anything. He wants you. He wants you. He doesn't want your ministry. He doesn't want your title. He doesn't want your church. He wants you. You know, it's really interesting. I know that a lot of times as young adults you struggle with, you know, the will of God in our lives. And we all do too. I mean, I'm almost 40 years old. I still struggle with the will of God in my life. What's next? And what am I doing? How long and this and that? And we struggle with the will of God in our lives. And we want God to make it known. We want God to make it clear. And I believe that God does want that for us too. And the Bible says that really clearly in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, where it says, you know, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will what? He will make your paths straight, right? He will make a straight path is a what kind of path? It's a very obvious path, right? It's really easy to follow a straight path. So it's like He's promising us, listen, I will make my will abundantly clear and known to you. I'm going to make it really easy. But there's other places in the Bible where it says this. It says, it is the glory of the Lord to conceal a matter. So it's almost as if like, well, wait a second, like, how's that work? On one hand, it's like God wants to make it all known, and on the other hand, it's like it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, right? But I just think this, and I heard this thought from Stephen Furtick from Elevation Church. I don't know how many of you follow guys like him or not. But, you know, he said once, and this it's just really struck me, but he said this once. He said that sometimes the reason why God conceals His will for us, and if you're sitting here tonight and you're just like, I feel like I'm not certain of what God's will is for my life right now. I feel like, and a lot of you said that to me when you sent me a text message the first night, or when we sat and talked just one-on-one for a couple minutes that how with each one of you. A lot of you said to me, some of you are like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I graduate. I'm not exactly sure what I'm called into. And so you're in that season where you're kind of looking, you're kind of wondering, like, what's God's will? What's God's plan for my life? You know, what's this all about? You know? And here's the danger that some of us have in our relationship with God. The worst thing that could happen to you during your 4 years of college here is that you could figure out what God's will is for your life and do it void of having a close relationship with God. Because more than God wanting you to figure out what His will is for your life, you know what He really wants more than that? You. He wants you. He wants you. He wants me. That's always been more important than you figuring out what His will is. It would be really scary, honestly, if you figured out what God's will is for your life and did it without actually knowing Him. Because you would just ruin it all. That's why it's so important that when you wrestle with seasons of loneliness, that you're able to take that lonely time, that lonely season, and turn it into an alone time with God. Let's keep moving on here on this point. Letter B, watch for compulsion. Watch for compulsion for completion. The compulsion for completion. Probably should update that slide so it makes a little bit more sense there. Your desire to complete something. and this is so true for me. I can overlook, again, this ties in with the whole will of God thing. I can be so it can be so compelling to me. I'm so compulsive. I just have to know. I have to complete this. I have to figure this out. I'm pushing and pushing and pushing so hard that I'm missing God in the whole process. Number one, we are complete in God and God alone. Right? That's where it all starts at for all of us. That's where relationships start for all of us. Number two, we will not find our completeness in ministry, in people, or what others think of us. We find it in God and God alone. Number three, you must become complete in Christ and confident in His calling upon your life. That's the reason why for some of you, you still, even today, even after being here for years, or being close to your senior year, you're still wrestling with, what's God's plan for my life? Like, what's God's will for my life? Before God reveals all that to you, the bigger thing that He's trying to do is make you complete in Him. Because if you don't have that foundation, then nothing else matters. His will doesn't matter, right? If you can't take your moments of loneliness now and learn how to process them in a healthy way, rather than always having to reach out, or I'm lonely so I got to go hang out with all the friends, or I'm lonely so I got to go to this, or I'm lonely so I go to some bad habit that I once had in life, whatever it is, whether it's a sinful habit or whether it's just an unhealthy habit. If you can't learn that now, then the pressure of ministry will destroy you. It will kill you. Because you're not complete in God yet. And so God's will for your life isn't even relevant at this point. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of getting that? It's just a big point. I want you to make sure you understand. That was one. That was two. We did number one. Here's three. And these last couple points are a little bit faster here. How do we deal with friendships and ministry? How do we deal with loneliness? Number three, spend time with godly peers. This is important. You need to be very intentional about this. Don't just make friends, but strategically choose who your friends are going to be. It's like that whole, you have to choose your friends, not allow them to choose you. Watch for friends that have the Jonah effect on your life. The Jonah effect, the I get discouraged, I get down, I want to run away effect. So I want to run away with those friends. Maybe not physically running away, but just kind of mentally and emotionally, I'm just kind of run away and I kind of go into a whole new place, or the Jonah effect in the sense that God's speaking very clearly to you, but you're doing the exact opposite. Watch out for those kind of friends in your life. They'll kill you in ministry. In fact, they'll kill you now in college. And again, you're not a youth group, and so I'm not going to give you all the typical friendship sermons and all that kind of stuff like that, But the reality is, all of us will wrestle with friendship for the rest of our life, and we can still choose friends that have the wrong effect on us. Number three, we don't choose whether or not we're influenced. We can only choose by whom or what we are influenced. All of us will be influenced. Period. What you're really choosing is not whether you'll be influenced or not. Whether you're really choosing is who will influence you. Does that make sense? Okay? Because you put yourself in any situation for a long enough period of time and you will be influenced. That's just the reality of it. So choose very carefully. Show me your friends, I will show you your future. You probably heard that. Your youth pastor probably said that to you when you were a kid growing up. Number four, friendships and ministry. Find a local ministry network. Get connected with other guys and other girls that are in the area, wherever you find yourself out. There are people just like you in your community at the church right down the road. And it might not be another church that's the same denomination as what your church is, but it doesn't really matter. What you'll find is that your theological differences with somebody are so minuscule compared to all the things that you have in common. Things that you have that are familiar with one another. So you have to be intentional about that. This is an area that I have not been as intentional as what I want to be. Just reaching out and building relationships with other youth pastors in the area, and good, solid relationships. Not like the, oh yeah, I know that guy, or I know that guy, or I have their phone number, or whatever. But just doing life, building friendships, relationships with one another. In my setting, it's been really easy for me to rely on some of my friendships that are there on staff, right? And so I've kind of been able to get away with it. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying I've been kind of able to get away with it because of the situation I found myself in. The healthier thing to do for me and for anybody in any situation is to find some good ministry-minded friends, people that are in ministry or people that are maybe volunteering in ministry and working another job or whatever, that are outside of the church. Because then I can really talk. I can really be myself. I can, without the fear of, this is someone that I work with, or this is one of my youth volunteers, or whoever this. And so you're going to have to be intentional about that. All right? Number 5, be intentional about spending time with longtime friends. You're going to graduate from college here, Lord willing, one day you're going to graduate. And some of you aren't believing that yet, but it'll happen. Just because you failed the quiz tonight doesn't mean that you're not going to graduate. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up. I'm going to give you this cap in a minute, and you're going to feel a lot better about yourself, okay? When you graduate from here, you're going to figure out probably within the first couple months who the people are that you spend a lot of time with here that are going to become lifelong friends. Not all of them are going to be lifelong friends. I'm just going to tell you that right now. You say, thank God. Some of them. What's that? Oh, yeah. Not all of them are going to be lifelong friends. I have. When I was here on campus, I would say that there was like 1, 2, 3, 4, probably four guys that I was really close with that on campus, and 2 of them I hardly ever talk to anymore. And when I do talk, I still really enjoy the conversations, and we just kind of connect again. And the other 2 I talk with more frequently. One of them I've never lost contact with. He was a guy that we played basketball together for 4 years. He was our point guard, and so we just we spent a lot of time together. And I'm sure that just because of proximity-wise, it became easier for us to stay close because he is probably about like a 45-minute drive from me now, and so we still get together. And we, just meet and go together for lunch or whatever. And now, he's got his family and kids, and I got my family and kids, and we've done like some little vacations together. And we'll, they'll come up and spend a day at our house, and we'll go down and spend, just things like that. But we have to be intentional about that. And you're going to have those people that you're going to be like, man, these like this guy or this girl, like these are going to be some lifelong friends. And you're going to have to be intentional about doing whatever it takes in order to keep that relationship alive. And to say, man, we're going to spend time together. We're going to be intentional about connecting and sitting together and talking and sharing life and praying for one another. And it needs to be, and I just want to encourage you with this, it needs to be like old school communication. Not just the text messages, not just the emails, not just the Facebook. I use all that stuff consistently. But it needs to be like I'm talking on the phone, I'm sharing life together, we're praying for one another, I'm meeting you face to face, we're talking, we're spending time together, we're with one another. That's going to help you tremendously, especially when you're going through your seasons of loneliness where you feel like people are upset with me, people that used to love me, people that used to be my youth leaders are gone now. I've been where I'm at now in ministry, I've been there long enough where, trying to think here, I didn't think of this number ahead of time. There's only one youth leader that started with me 11 years ago that's still along for the ride. And we hired him, and so he's on staff. And he's one that's getting ready to transition into a new job. So in the next month, like even that won't be true. That will happen. People will come and go. But when you find someone in your life that you love them and they love you, and you have that brotherly or that sisterly love, that kindredship together, those kindred hearts that come together, and it might be someone right here in this room or someone else on this campus somewhere, hold on to that for dear life. Don't let that go. That's worth the time that you're going to invest in it. That's worth the money that you'll spend to travel or fly wherever you have to go in order to spend a couple days with those people. My dad, when I was like 4 or 5 years, when I was 3 years old, actually, I'm sorry, we moved to this little town in Pennsylvania called Greencastle. Does anyone know what Greencastle is? Right? We moved to Greencastle. My dad became the pastor at First Assembly God in Greencastle, and next, about a couple miles from Greencastle, is this little tiny town called St. Thomas, and some of you might know where that's at. And when we moved there, my dad discovered that the guy who was pastoring at the church in St. Thomas was a guy that they had gone to school together here at Valley Forge. Right before Valley Forge was like EBI back then. It goes way, way, way back, whatever. And And so they intentionally decided we're going to become friends. We're in neighboring towns, and we're going to become friends. And our family, me and my 2 older sisters. I was the baby of the family, and their family. The youngest was a boy, and he had 2 older sisters. And my dad and Stan Williams, that was the guy's name, just became like best friends. They weren't great friends in college, but they became like great friends during the 6 years that our family was there. And we did everything together. We vacationed together. When it was like, well, let's go to Niagara Falls this year, we're going camping this year. Or he went out and bought a motorcycle, my dad went out and bought a motorcycle, they went out and bought like a little pop-up camper thing, we went out and bought one of those things, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? They still vacation together, right? I mean, they go camping together all the time, they go on cruises together, they do all this stuff. Well, my dad will tell you, and we're going to interview him in a couple weeks, my dad will tell you that relationship for him, that one relationship with Stan Williams, is probably one of the biggest reasons why 40 years later, he's still doing it. He's still in ministry. He still hasn't given up. Because through all seasons of discouragement and all seasons of depression, all the things that you go through, my dad struggled with depression oftentimes in his life, even as a pastor of a church. And he's gone through seasons where he'd sit there on Sunday afternoon, come home from church, open up the Sunday paper and read through the job classified section to see if there's any jobs in the area that he could do. Anything but ministry. He's been through seasons like that. But his friendships and having the ability to pick up the phone and having the ability to drive somewhere, go wherever it is, and connect with that long-time friend, that long-term friend, is huge. And so when you find that person, hold on to him. A couple more thoughts here before I break. This is important. Number 6, learn how to talk back to your emotions rather than letting your emotions talk to you. Self-talk, the mind games, huge. Huge. Probably should have got to this point quicker so we could camp out on it longer. This is biblical too, right? What does it say in Psalm chapter 42, verse 5? It's David. He says, "Why, my soul, are you so downcast? Why are you so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise Him, my Savior, my God." Who's David talking to?
Himself.
He's talking to himself. Right? What does Paul say to us in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5? Take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Well, a lot of the times, our own self-talk, our own emotional mind games that we play with ourselves are the things that destroy us the most. Sometimes those are the things that take us out of ministry quicker than anything else does. I love this quote. This is a Jeannie Mayo quote. Right choices eventually lead to right emotions. Right choices eventually lead to right emotions. One of the reasons why oftentimes we fail when it comes to friendships and we fail when it comes to the battle of loneliness is because what's on repeat in our brain, right here between our ears, is killing us. It's just this complete cycle of negativity over and over and over again. And we're telling ourselves things that are just destroying us on the inside. You tell yourself a lie long enough, eventually you're going to believe it to be true. And that's oftentimes what we do. And every one of us wrestles with it. And this isn't just an emotional thing that just, the girls in the room wrestle with. Us guys wrestle with this too. We just don't really talk about it as much. But we wrestle with it. We wrestle with what we tell ourselves. We wrestle with what's happening in our brain. We wrestle with the thoughts. And I'm not just talking about like the thoughts, like the typical kind of mind thoughts that guys wrestle with. The stuff that's like lust-oriented stuff. I'm just talking about like the things that we believe, the negativity, the stuff we tell ourselves about ourselves, the stuff we tell ourselves about someone else that we don't know whether it's true or not. Your self-talk is going to be huge when it comes to this issue of wrestling through periods of loneliness in your life. And so you're going to have to learn how to discipline your mind and how to tell yourself the right thing. And how to do what David did and say, listen, why? Why am I going to say this to himself? Why am I going to believe this? I just imagine David in one of his seasons saying, why am I so down? Why am I so disturbed? I'm going to put my hope in God. He will be my praise. He is my Savior. He's my God. Those are phrases that we have to learn. And if you can't figure out how to control your self-talk, here's as simple as this. Go open up your Bible. Go find your favorite 10 scripture verses. Go and commit them all to memory. And when your mind is going crazy and you're telling yourself all kinds of junk, just start saying your scripture verses. Even if they don't apply. Because you saying anything from God's Word in that moment is going to be a whole lot better than some of the stuff that you're already thinking of. Right? Another quote here. We don't choose our future, we choose our habits, and our habits determine our future. Last point here. How do we do it? How do we overcome loneliness? Number 7. Give away to others the emotions that you desire the most. Give away to others the emotions that you desire the most. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, we talked about it briefly last week. It's a principle. It's a stated principle. I won't ask you any more questions about stated principles, but just wanted to point that out. We reap what we sow. When we take care of others, we can trust that God will take care of us. This is one of the things that I say to my youth leaders all the time, especially to my small group leaders. I say, be for someone else the person that you always wanted and needed someone to be for you. Some of you sit here in this room and you needed a dad, or you needed a mom, or you needed a big brother or a big sister, or you needed a coach, or you needed a mentor, or you needed somebody to say the right words to you at the right time, to encourage you at the right time. And oftentimes we become prisoners of our needs. I need this. I need someone to do this for me. And really, if we play out what we're saying, what we're really saying is this. Because I need someone to become this for me, I can't provide that or be that for someone else. I don't believe that's true. Because I believe in the principle of reaping and sowing. And so I believe that it's my responsibility to become that person for someone else. Whatever it is that I needed growing up, whatever it is, wherever my weaknesses were at, whatever it is that I always wish that my coach would say this, or that my youth pastor would say this, or that my dad and mom would say this, or whatever it is, I strive to become that for someone else. I say to my leaders all the time, you're going to be the spiritual mom or spiritual dad for these kids that they never had and that they won't have. And you might not have ever had that in your life, but you get the chance to be that for someone else. You get the chance to be that answer that you always wanted for yourself. Now you can do it for someone else. One last thought for you. How many of you have ever read this amazing book? Anybody? Favorites. You need this book. You can preach a whole retreat from this book. I did it once. It's really good, actually. You don't need the Bible. No, I'm totally joking. Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. It's this really cool story of a toy rabbit who is trying to figure out how to become real. And he's trying to figure out the secret. What does it mean? What does it mean to become real and just become like that authentic person? And so while he's living life there in the toy room, he runs into the skin horse. And so one day he has a conversation with the skin horse. And I'm just going to read this one little section to you. I'm not going to read the whole book to you. But this is pretty cool. The skin horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath. And most of the hairs in his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away. And he knew that they were only toys, and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced like the skin horse understand all about it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day, when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender, before Nana came in to tidy the room. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside of you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the skin horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up," he asked, "or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the skin horse. "You become. And it takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because when you're real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. I love the whole book, but I love that section the most. And the symbolism of it, for me, helps me a lot when I think about what it means to really authentically be in ministry and to just allow Jesus to help you become the real version of yourself that He always wanted you to become. And seasons of loneliness coupled with great friendships take you down the road to becoming that real version of who God always meant for you to be. And when you couple those things together with the thought that so many of the teenagers that we minister to live in this fake world, this facade, this world of having tons of friends on Facebook but not really having authentic, true relationships, this world of drama, this world of always fronting and posing and trying to make themselves into something that they really aren't for the sake of trying to fit in and belong. How refreshing is it for our students when they run into someone like one of us who can be completely real, who can absorb the pain of their life into the realness of who we are in Christ Jesus and love them authentically and real, without any fakeness, total transparency, total authenticity. God gives us loneliness as a gift so that we can really discover who we are in Him. So if you're sitting in this room tonight and you are in a season where you're struggling with loneliness, congratulations. Because God's given you a wonderful gift. And you can waste the gift, and you can waste the moment, and you can try to fill all of those moments up that God gives you with everything else that's out there, with your iPod and your friends and all of the college world, where you can cherish it and you can say, I thank God that I have moments like these where I can take my lonely times and turn them into alone times.